Broncos country, welcome back to another video here on the channel. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to spend them here with me. And in today's video, we're going to be going over the Denver Broncos traveling to East Rutherford, New Jersey to take on the New York Jets in the Week 4 matchup between the Broncos and Jets. If you do enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel as the support is greatly appreciated. And I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, so if you could help me reach that goal, that'd mean the absolute world to me. And as always, before we get started, I just want to remind you that no matter who you are, Jesus loves you and he wants to have a relationship with you and that he is the king. And with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump in to this Week 4 preview. So, as we take a look here at the current records, the Broncos, we are 1-2, tied for 4th in the AFC West with the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Jets being 2-1 and 2nd in the AFC East behind the Buffalo Bills. I just want to apologize for not getting my Week 3 recap for the Broncos out. I just haven't been feeling like myself this past week, so, I recorded something, but I wasn't really proud with how the recording came out, so I decided not to release it, but yeah, I'm sorry for that. Hopefully videos are getting back on track. Here we have the preview though. So here are my 4 keys to victory for the Broncos. The pass rush needs to get home on Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, he is not going to throw to one target. He is going to spread the ball out. If Garrett Wilson's open, he's going to get it to Garrett Wilson. If Mike Williams is open, he's going to go to Mike Williams. If it's Lazard, he's going to go to Lazard. If it's going to be Tyler Conklin, they're going to throw it to the tight end. If they want to get their running backs involved, they will get their running backs involved. Rodgers will spread the football around and get players to catch the football. So the secondary has to be sound, but the pass rush has to get home on Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to be super mobile, so you have to be able to get in and pressure the pocket. Now, the second thing we have to do is we have to limit Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. Many of you know Braylon Allen was my RB1 in this past draft. I wanted the Broncos to get him, but he was taken a few picks before the Broncos could draft him. Yeah, Braylon Allen was one of he was my top running back in the class if you watched all my draft videos. And then Breece Hall, we know what he is. He is a top running back in this league, so we have to limit what their ground game is going to potentially do and limit the run. On the offensive side of the football, we need to have solid pass and run blocking. We have to be able to open up the lanes for our running backs and for Bo if he chooses to scramble, as well as protect Bo in the pocket so he has time for the plays to develop, obviously, and make a throw down the field to deliver a strike. So that's what needs to happen. And the fourth thing is Bo needs to protect the football. He didn't turn it over at all in Week 3, but Bo Nix has to protect the football. We can't be fumbling. We can't be throwing many interceptions if we want to win this game. Bo needs to protect the football. And those are my 4 keys to the Broncos' victory this Sunday against the Jets. As for the injuries, linebacker Alex Singleton is the biggest one for the Broncos, going down with an ACL tear, ending his season. He actually tore it in the first quarter and played for the entire game, which is absolutely insane to do. That is crazy, but that is going to be a big loss for the Broncos. The leading tackler, he was a big part of that defense. He was a captain for a reason, and so losing Alex Singleton is a big loss for the Broncos. J.L. Skinner, a safety 6th-round pick from, It was 2023. And it sucks. He wasn't getting a whole lot of playing time in games, but I do like J.L. Skinner as a prospect, as a safety. It sucks that he's out, but I don't know if it'll impact us too much because he wasn't getting a lot of playing time as is. For Nate Atkins, he has a shoulder injury. It's unspecified whether or not he's going to play. Yeah, I don't know. I would assume he would play, but I don't have any inside information on that. He kind of plays a fullback tight end type of hybrid role like Andrew Beck did a couple years ago. And then Josh Reynolds, our wide receiver too, he has an Achilles injury. It's unspecified whether or not he is going to play, but more than likely I think he will, because I do think he was dealing with this injury last season. And so I do expect Josh Reynolds to play tomorrow. Tomorrow when you're watching this, I do expect Josh Reynolds to be playing. As for the Jets injury, their offensive tackle Morgan Moses has a knee injury and he is out this week, and it is really annoying me that in bracket is not bolded in red, but it is what it is. Linebacker CJ Mosley, he has a toe injury and he is actually doubtful for this week. You will see him in the preview, but he does have the little asterisk next to his name because he is doubtful to play. And then offensive tackle Tyron Smith, he just had a rest and he is going to be playing tomorrow. As for the coaching matchup, we have Sean Payton versus Robert Saleh. This is Payton's 17th year as a head coach. Obviously, 15 with the Saints. This is his second with the Broncos. He's coached 261 games as a head coach with 161 wins and 100 losses. He has no ties, and he has a 617 win percentage in the NFL. As for Robert Saleh, this is his fourth year as a head coach, all four coming with the Jets. He was previously the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator before coming over to New York, and he has coached 54 games with the Jets, winning 20 of them with 34 losses, no ties, with a 370 win percentage. Now, you can say what you want about those numbers. He didn't have the best team or whatever. Rodgers should hopefully help start getting that win percentage up for the Jets. Hopefully not this weekend, but he should help with that. And so, yeah, this is Robert Saleh's fourth year as a head coach, and this is the coaching matchup. As for the coordinators, the Broncos ROC is Joe Lombardi, with our defensive coordinator being our former head coach, Vance Joseph. Special teams coordinator being Ben Kotwicka. With the Jets OC is our old friend, old head coach of ours, Nathaniel Hackett. Jets defensive coordinator is Jeff Ulbrich, and the Jets special teams coordinator is Brant Boyer. Let's look at the quarterback matchup now. Bo Nix, in his first 3 games in the NFL, has 71 completions on 113 attempts. He has a 62.8% completion percentage, which, when you look at it, that's not what you expect from Bo Nix, at least the Oregon version, who I think we're getting. But, he had a lower completion percentage, and it's starting to come up after last week's game. That number has improved. Still would like to see it come up a little bit. I'd like to see 70. I think that's ideal, but I'm not mad at 62.8%. Bo has thrown for 600 yards through the first 3 weeks with 2 touchdowns, both of them coming on the ground via rushes. 4 interceptions, could easily have more. The 4th interception that he threw, though, it was on a Hail Mary, so it was kind of garbage time. So I don't know, it kind of weighs each other out because there were dropped potential interceptions as well as an interception that really meant nothing because it was in the final seconds of the game. And then Bo has a passer rating of a 61.8%. As for Aaron Rodgers, this season he has played in all 3 games with 58 completions on 68 attempts with a 67.4% completion percentage. He's thrown for 624 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception, and has a passer rating of a 103.1. Aaron Rodgers is looking like he is back. So, yeah, it's gonna be tough for the Broncos to get a win facing Aaron Rodgers. Next up, let's talk about the Broncos running backs. I have 3 of them here. Javonte Williams, I still technically think he's going to be the starter for the Broncos. I think they're going to roll with him. 3 games, 24 yards, 24 rushing attempts, 52 yards, 10 receptions, 77 yards. He'll be used in the ground game, in the pass game. He'll also be utilized as a pass blocker, as an extra blocker in the backfield, which I think the Broncos like. But in terms of our best runner, I don't know. I think that ACL injury would just really kill Javonte, man. Then we got Jaleel McLaughlin, who hasn't been playing the greatest in 3 games. He has 18 rushing attempts for 40 yards, and then he has 6 receptions for 8 yards and 1 total touchdown on the season, that coming on the ground. But who I think the Broncos should be starting at running back 1 is Tyler Beatty. Now, he's played in 2 games. He missed the first game because he was inactive on the practice squad, but during the 2 games that he played last week against Tampa Bay and against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he had 10 rushing attempts for 86 yards and 1 reception for 2 yards and no touchdowns. To me, just based off the eye test, I think Beatty has to be the starting running back. That would be my preference. That would be my opinion. We'll have to see what the Broncos obviously do, but Beatty is the RB1 as of right now because McLaughlin hasn't looked good. You look at Javonte, he hasn't been good. Audric Estime, he's on the IR dealing with an injury. So, Blake Watson, he's on the active roster, but he's been inactive. So, Beatty just got promoted to the active roster. So, the running backs haven't been great. Definitely need to improve in that area and improve in run blocking as well to open up holes for the running backs. But, yeah, the running game hasn't been too spectacular, but Beatty has looked really, really solid as the Broncos' best rusher so far. In terms of the Jets' front 7, we've got Will McDonald, who I really like. He was one of my guys in the 2023 draft. I know we didn't have a first-round pick, but he was one of my guys who I really liked in that draft class, and I think he's a really underrated defender in the league. Then you got Vaughn Kinlaw coming over from the 49ers, their former 2020 first-round pick. Then you got Quinnen Williams, a former third overall pick in 2019, Michael Clemens, Jamian Sherwood, C.J. Mosley, who is dealing with an injury. We'll have to see if he plays, and Quincy Williams. So far this season, this particular group of the front seven has 84 tackles, 20 pressures, 8.5 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, and 11 blitzes. Or they've attempted 11 blitzes on the season. As for the Jets running backs, they've got Breece Hall, who's had a really solid season, and he's on my fantasy team because it's a dynasty league, and I drafted Breece Hall. I think it was his rookie year, but that's when we did the initial draft where every player was available. So I did snag Breece Hall, and so far Breece Hall this season in 3 games has 46 rushing attempts for 170 yards, 16 receptions for 120 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And then we got Braylon Allen, who was my RB1 in this class. He's also on my fantasy team in Dynasty. And Braylon Allen, like I mentioned, and I keep mentioning, he was my RB1 this past draft, and he has looked really, really solid this season for the Jets. In 3 games, he has 19 rushing attempts for 96 yards, 6 receptions for 45 yards, and 2 total touchdowns on the season. As if we look at the Broncos front 7, we got Zach Allen, B.J. Jones, John Franklin Myers is coming back to face his old team in the Jets, Nick Benito, Justin Sternad, Cody Barton, and Jonathan Cooper. So far this season, the Broncos front 7, this particular group, has 57 tackles, 22 pressures, 7 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, and has attempted 29 blitzes so far. As for the cornerback receiver matchup, here's how it's going to work out for the Broncos. Sutton is probably going to be going up against Sauce. Josh Reynolds is going to be going up against DJ Reed. And Marvin Mims will be going up against Michael Carter, their cornerback. I don't know if they still have the former Michael Carter, who was teammates with Javonte Williams at North Carolina. But, yeah, it's Michael Carter, the cornerback. Michael Carter, the second. As for Sutton, so far this season, in 3 games, he has 12 receptions on 27 targets, 132 yards, averaging 11 yards per reception, and no touchdowns. So far as we haven't thrown any touchdown passes, so you're going to see zeros for all the Broncos here. As for Sauce this season, and this is why you really can't go off of stats, and this is why stats lie and stats deceive, because Sauce is one of the best corners in the NFL, but if you look at the stats, you wouldn't think so. But Sauce is still one of the best corners in the NFL. 14 targets, 10 completions, 71.4% completion percentage. He's given up 139 yards with a 126.8 passer rating. Missed 3 tackles, which is 25% of his tackles. He's given up 1 touchdown and has no interceptions, and has 1 pass defended on the season. As for Josh Reynolds, so far he has played in 3 games. He has 11 receptions for 15 yards, 11 receptions on 15 targets for 174 yards. There we go. Averaging 15.8 yards per reception and has no touchdowns on the season. Going up against DJ Reed, who, he has had a solid season so far as well. Let me restart. He has 3 completions allowed on 5 targets for a 60% completion percentage. He's only given up 30 yards and allowed a pass rating of a 77.1 when he's been targeted. He's only missed 1 tackle, which is 8.3% of his tackles. He's given up no touchdowns and has no interceptions, and has defended 1 pass on the season. Then if we look at Marvin Mims, this is someone who the Broncos need to get more involved on the offense. We have to get Marvin Mims more involved. Same thing with Troy Franklin, but Mims is a dynamic and explosive playmaker, and I hope we get the ball into his hands more as the season goes on. 3 games, he only has 2 receptions on 4 targets for 19 yards, averaging 9.5 yards per reception, and no touchdowns, but we need to target Mims deep. He needs to be a deep threat. You need to be throwing the ball at least 20-plus yards to Mims with the speed that he has. He needs to be that deep threat for this offense. But he will be going up against Michael Carter, who has allowed 6 completions on 9 targets, has a completion percentage of a 66.7%, has allowed 56 yards and a passer rating of an 83.6. He has 1 missed tackle, which is 14.3% of his tackles, has no touchdowns, he has no interceptions, but has given up no touchdowns, and has defended 1 pass so far on the season. If we look at the tight ends for the Broncos, now that's going to be Greg Dulcich and Adam Troutman. And Dulcich, these are his exact same stats as last week, other than he played in 1 more game. Didn't get another reception, didn't get another target, which is 5 receptions for 11 targets, 28 yards, 5.6 average, no touchdowns. Dulcich wasn't really utilized last week in Tampa Bay. Hopefully that changes because I do think he is a dynamic playmaker as a receiver at the tight end position. Then we look at Adam Troutman, who finally got his first catch. 3 games, 1 reception on 2 targets, 13 yards. Yeah, Troutman, I don't mind him getting involved. I think Dulcich needs to be the main wide receiving and pass catching target at the tight end position, but I don't mind Troutman getting involved. He's kind of the hybrid blocker, receiver, tight end. But I do think we need to get him utilized more. I think we need to get our tight ends utilized more in general for the Broncos. But so far, Troutman hasn't really been involved in terms of the receiving game, but has helped in terms of blocking and being that extra lineman, so to speak. Him and Matt Pert being the extra lineman, because Pert comes in as an eligible receiver. Then we look at the linebackers for the Jets, and they actually run a 4-3, so that's why they have 3 linebackers. Previously, the Broncos have all been facing 3-4 defenses, but we are facing a 4-3 this week. Jamie Sherwood so far this season has 5 completions on 5 targets, has allowed 44 yards and 103.3 passer rating allowed when targeted in the air. CJ Mosley has given up 4 completions on 8 targets, 50%, 23 yards allowed, and a 56.2 passer rating allowed. 3 missed tackles, which is 12.5 of his tackles, and he's going to be a big loss because he is doubtful. And if he is not playing, then that is going to be a big, big loss for the New York Jets this week. And then they also have Quincy Williams, who I do think is more of a pass rusher for them, but I do think he can play as a middle linebacker as well. And when he's targeted, he's given up 10 completions. At least from my experience, I think he's more of a pass rusher, but I could absolutely be wrong here. But Quincy Williams has allowed 10 completions on 13 targets for a 76.9% completion percentage, has given up 56 yards, and has allowed a passer rating of an 84.1, has 2 missed tackles, which is 7.7% of his tackles. Then we have Chuck Clark and Tony Adams, the safeties. Chuck Clark, who's obviously coming in from the Baltimore Ravens so far this season, has given up 3 completions on 3 targets, only 28 yards, 105.6 pass rating when targeted, which to me, the pass rating when targeted is a solid stat, but when it's 3 completions down the field and only for 28 yards, I don't really take that into full effect unless it's they've gotten a lot of targets. That's when you can start saying, okay, this is kind of the passer rating they're giving up here. But he does have 1 missed tackle, which is 5.9% of his tackles. As for Tony Adams, he's been having a really solid season for the Jets in the back end. He's only allowed 4 completions on 13 targets, a completion percentage of 30.8%, has only given up 83 yards and a passer rating of a 54.3. He has 3 missed tackles, which is 14.3% of his missed tackles, and he has 4 passes defended. Tony Adams looks like a dog for the Jets so far, and he's been a really solid safety for them in coverage this season. As for the Broncos corners versus the Jets receivers, we got Surtain versus Garrett Wilson. That's going to be a fun matchup. Riley Moss versus Mike Williams. Jaquan McMillan versus Alan Lazard. Starting off with Garrett Wilson this season, and as Aaron Rodgers honestly said in his press conference, teams have game plan to take away Garrett Wilson, which I don't blame them. I think that's what the Broncos are going to do as well. In 3 games, Garrett only has 15 receptions on 26 targets for 150 yards and 1 touchdown. And, it's been frustrating. I hope we do it this week as a Broncos fan, but it's also frustrating because I do own him in fantasy football. So when they're not playing the Broncos, I want Garrett Wilson to get the ball. But, yeah, Garrett Wilson, he is a really solid receiver. And so you have to game plan to take him out of the game, and you can't let him kill you through the air because he is a really solid weapon at the wide receiver position. As for Surtain, the stats don't look great, but Surtain has been having a really good season. He's shut down Mike Evans last week, shut down George Pickens. Did have some penalties, but I thought those were some ticky-tacky penalties. At least a couple of them were. And then in week 1, he also shut down DK Metcalf. So Pat Surtain, the stats don't look good, but what he's been doing on the field, covering those wide receiver ones, he has been absolutely shut down this season, which is par to the course. 5 completions on 7 targets, 71.4% completion percentage. Has only given up 55 yards, a 94.3 passer rating allowed, 1 pass defended, given up no touchdowns, has no interceptions as well, because I'm sure, as Jets fans know, teams don't throw to Surtain. Teams hardly throw his way. So it's going to be hard for him to get an interception, obviously, if they don't throw his way. But you like him taking out a team's wide receiver one for a game. As for Mike Williams this season, he's been slowly implemented in because he had an injury last season with the Chargers. But he's starting to slowly be implemented more and more and more into the Jets' game plan. And in 3 games, he has 4 receptions on 5 targets, 53 yards, and an average of 13.3 yards per reception. He's going up against Riley Moss, who is really starting to improve each and every week. The stats don't look like it, but Riley Moss has gotten better and better and better as these first 3 weeks of the season has gone along. I believe he was actually the highest rated corner this past week. So, that's awesome to see from Riley. I really am a big fan of Riley, and I was hoping he was going to get this opportunity this season, but so far this season, Riley has given up 13 completions on 19 targets, 68.4%, 123 yards, 103.6 passer rating, has 2 missed tackles, 8.7%, has given up the 1 touchdown, which was to Chris Godwin last week, which was the only touchdown on a perfectly thrown ball from Baker Mayfield, but also has 1 pass defended this season as well. I do expect Riley Moss to be picked on this game with Surtain being on Garrett Wilson and with Rodgers liking to spread the ball around. I do expect Riley Moss to be targeted a fair bit, and I'm hoping he can hold his own and maybe potentially even get that first career interception this week. We'll have to see. As for Allen Lazard, he's played in 3 games this season, has 11 receptions on 16 targets, 148 yards, a 13.5 average, and has 3 touchdowns. With the teams taking away Garrett Wilson, Rodgers is going to one of his favorite targets from Green Bay in Allen Lazard, who is now obviously in New York with Aaron Rodgers. As for Jaquan McMillan, though, he is holding his own in the slot. 10 completions on 13 targets, 76.9%, 53 yards, 83.2 passer rating, 16.7 missed tackle rate. Yeah, Jaquan McMillan, he's a really solid slot corner, and I'm glad we were able to snag him in undrafted free agency a couple of years ago because he has been a really, really solid slot cornerback, even through last season. Towards the end of last season, he did struggle a little bit. I don't know if that was just due to the fact that we're out of the playoffs or whatnot, but Jaquan McMillan has been balling. He is a really, 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 really good slot cornerback. As for the tight ends for the Jets, they got Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert. So far, Conklin this season has 7 receptions on 10 targets, 109 yards, and Ruckert has 2 receptions on 5 targets for 15 yards. So they're targeting Conklin more than Ruckert, but I do like Ruckert, and he's a young tight end. So we'll have to see if he gets more involved, but Conklin has been the guy at tight end for the Jets this season. As for the linebackers, we got Justin Sternad, who is replacing Alex Singleton, who just went on IR this season. So Sternad, the 2020 5th-round pick of the Broncos, is getting his start this week, and he's going with Cody Barton, who, he's been all right in coverage. He's been better than I expected, but nothing too crazy, giving up 32 yards, 4 completions. Yeah, he's been all right at the linebacking position in terms of coverage. As for the safety, PJ Locke has kind of been ebbing and flowing this season, has his highs and lows, but this season, 7 completions on 8 targets, 87.5, 39 yards, 126.6, 3 missed tackles, 1 touchdown at Loud, which was to Darnell Washington in week 2 against the Steelers, and has 1 pass defended. But Brandon Jones, he has been really, really solid so far to start his Denver Broncos tenure. 6 completions on 8 targets, 75% completion percentage, has only given up 32 yards and a 41.7 passer rating when targeted, has only missed 1 tackle, which is 5% of his tackles. He's given up no touchdowns, and of course has the 1 interception on Baker Mayfield last week against the Buccaneers, but also has 1 pass defended. It should be mentioned that Riley Moss forced a fumble at the end of last week's game on Cade Otton, and Brandon Jones recovered that fumble as well. As for the Broncos pass rush going up against the Jets offensive line, this is going to be the group with Baron Browning out. It's going to be Nick Benito, who I really like, Jonathan Cooper, who has been really solid this season, Jonah Ellis, the 3rd-round pick, who has a lot of upside, and he's been balling this season as well. Dondre Tillman, the rookie who we signed out of the UFL, I believe. He had 2 sacks in his debut game in the NFL. Zach Allen, who has been an absolute monster this season, potentially even our best player on defense. I don't know. I would still say Surtain, but Zach Allen is up there. And then John Franklin Myers, who has been a beast this season as well, playing against his former team. So a potential revenge game alert from John Franklin Myers. So far, this group of pass rushers has 46 tackles, 23 pressures, 10 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, and has attempted 35 blitzes. As for the Jets' offensive line, they got Tyron Smith, who he's a veteran. He's solid. They got John Simpson at their left guard. Joe Tippmann as a center, who is a young center who I wanted a couple years ago in the draft for the Broncos. Elijah Vera Tucker, who is a former first-round pick in 2021 when they had 2, and they selected, obviously, Zach Wilson second overall, and then they traded up for Elijah Vera Tucker. And then they have Olu Fashanu, who is their first-round pick this season, who I was a big fan of. He was my number 2 offensive tackle this season, or in this past draft, and I think he's going to be a baller. I think he's a baller. He would have been the first offensive tackle in 2023 off the board. That was the Paris Johnson year. Yeah, I think he would have been the first tackle. He's a really solid prospect. Maybe needs a little bit more of development, but I think the Jets got an absolute steal in Olu Fashanu. That's my personal opinion. And so far this season, the Jets' offensive line has only given up 5 sacks, only faced 16 blitzes, Aaron Rodgers has only been hurried twice. Aaron Rodgers has been hit 5 times, and he has faced 12 pressures this season. As for the Jets' pass rush, it is no joke. Like I mentioned earlier, they got Will McDonald, who is really underrated. He was one of my guys in that 2023 draft. And yeah, I think that Will McDonald is super, super underrated. They got Javon Kinlaw, of course, from the 49ers. Quinnen Williams, who you can't underestimate him. He is going to be a game wrecker in both stopping the run and rushing the passer. They got Michael Clemens, Solomon Thomas. That's kind of the main 5 if I had to pick out the 5 from what I know from an outsider's perspective of the Jets. But that group this season has 36 tackles, 21 pressures, 10 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, and has only attempted 2 blitzes. But despite only blitzing twice, they have gotten a lot of pressure on the quarterback. So for the Broncos offensive line, we've got pretty much our whole starting line except for the right tackle with obviously Mike McGlinchey going down. But at left tackle, it's Garrett Bowles. Then you got Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg at center, Quinn Miners, our best offensive lineman in my opinion, at right guard. And then Alex Palczewski, who is the undrafted free agent out of Illinois last season. And he was honestly pretty solid in his first start last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So far this season, this offensive line has only allowed 4 sacks, faced 35 blitzes, with Bo Nix being hurried 12 times, being hit 13 times, and pressured 29 times. So they have gotten a little bit better as each week is going on. Week 1 and 2 were not that great, but last week in week 3, they were actually pretty solid against the Buccaneers pass rush. And you can say what you want. They were missing Vita Vea last week, but the Broncos offensive line held their own last week against the Buccaneers pass rush. And I'm hoping they can do it again against the Jets, but the Jets have a really, really good pass rush, so it will be a challenge. As for Will Lutz this season, he is 9 for 9 on field goals and 3 for 3 on extra points. He has been perfect this season. I think from last season, a lot of people forget how good of a kicker Will Lutz truly is. He is one of the better kickers in the league, and I think that the change of scenery and moving to altitude, I think that affected him a little bit. Now that he's had a full season and an off season to practice, I think he is showing once again why he is one of the best kickers in the league. As for Riley Dixon, he's punted 16 times in 3 games, has an average of 50 yards per punt, has 800 total punts, which is not what you want to see for the Broncos. That's too many punts. Bo Nix only has 600 passing yards. We have 800 punt yards, which is not great. But teams have only returned 37 yards on Riley Dixon's punts, and his longest punt was a 65-yarder in Week 1 against the Seahawks. As for the Jets, Greg Zuerlein is 2 for 3 on field goals for a 66.7%, but he's 7 for 7. He is perfect on extra points this season. As for Thomas Morstead, they have 12 punts for 584 yards, averaging 48.7 per punt. 64 yards have been returned on them, and his longest was a 60-yard punt. As for the Broncos kick returner, that's going to be Marvin Mims, who made a Pro Bowl for kick returning last year. He is a dynamic playmaker back there. And as much as I like how much of a playmaker he is back there, I want to see him more involved on the offense. But So far this season, he's returned 9 punts for 94 yards and 3 kicks for 69 yards this season. No touchdowns on either yet. As for Xavier Gipson, who was the undrafted free agent last season, he was kind of fun to watch on Hard Knocks and someone you were rooting for. So far this season, he has returned 8 punts for 66 yards and 5 kicks for 134 yards and no touchdowns either. My final thoughts, this is a tough one. This is a very tough one. Maybe I should be negative because when I was negative last week about the Broncos, they won. I'm not going to give a score prediction. I think this is going to be a challenging game. This is going to be a game that the defense has to show up for the Broncos, and they have shown up. They have been our best unit. We have been a top defense this season. That needs to continue against this high-power offense led by Aaron Rodgers. But Bo Nix, it looks like he's improving maybe. Hopefully he can build on this, his last performance against Tampa Bay, and use it as building blocks against this tough New York Jets defense. Let me know what your thoughts are. What is the score going to be for this game in the comment section below? Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Parker, and I'll catch you in the next one. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe, as the support is greatly appreciated, and I will talk to you in the next one. Peace out.